This is not just the story of a dog. This is the story of a winter that refused to win. On a frozen afternoon in a small mountain town, a police officer received a call about a puppy left behind in the snow with a broken leg and no name. Everyone said she would not survive the night. But something happened when he knelt beside her. Something that changed both of their lives forever. What this tiny German shepherd did next forced a man who had lost everything to believe in miracles again, and what that man chose to do in return would leave an entire town in tears. Before we begin this unforgettable journey of hope and healing, tell us where you are watching from today and leave your city or country in the comments below. Because this story might just remind you that sometimes the smallest heart carries the greatest light. Snow fell over Silver Pine, Colorado, like the town was being slowly erased by something ancient and patient. The mountains stood in quiet witness, their peaks swallowed by low gray clouds, while the main street glowed with a thin line of yellow lamplight reflecting on ice-glazed asphalt. It was the kind of winter afternoon where the cold did not merely touch the skin. It entered the bones, the kind of cold that made even time itself seem to walk slower. Officer Nathan Cole was driving his patrol truck past the frozen river when the call came in, his windshield wipers dragging ice from the glass, his breath fogging the cabin. Nathan was 41, tall, broad-shouldered, his once black hair now threaded heavily with silver at the temples, his face carved by years of wind, service, and grief. The faint scar across his left cheek, a souvenir from a rescue operation long before Silver Pine became his home. His eyes, pale and steady, belonged to a man who had seen the end of too many stories and had quietly stopped expecting happy ones. Dispatch told him there was an abandoned animal behind the Silver Pine Veterinary Clinic, possible neglect case, weather exposure. Nathan turned the wheel without answering, the snow crunching under his tires like something breaking open. Behind the clinic, the wind cut harder, funneled between the brick walls and the frozen dumpsters, carrying the smell of disinfectant and pine. Dr. Margaret Hale stood waiting by the service door, arms folded inside her long wool coat. Margaret was in her late 50s, tall and thin, her gray hair always pulled into the same severe knot at the back of her head, her posture straight as a fence post, her eyes sharp but kind in the way of someone who had spent decades holding broken creatures together with her hands. Years ago, the death of her teenage son in a highway accident had changed her. She still worked with unwavering discipline, but something softer now lived behind her voice, a quiet patience for pain. Beside her stood Lucy Benton, 24, the newest vet tech, short, round-faced, freckles across her nose, red hair escaping her knit cap, her eyes too big for the winter world she was still learning how to survive. Lucy's heart ran faster than her training, and everyone knew it. Margaret nodded toward the snowbank near the fence. Someone dropped her off less than an hour ago. No collar, no chip, no papers, wrapped in that. Nathan followed her gaze and saw a bundle of brown cloth half buried in snow, the edges stiff with frost. He knelt, the cold biting through his uniform pants, and gently unfolded the cloth. Inside lay the smallest German shepherd puppy he had ever seen, maybe 5 months old, black and tan, fur matted and thin, ribs faintly visible beneath the coat, her body shaking not with panic, but with exhaustion. One hind leg lay at an unnatural angle, swollen and trembling. Her ears were too large for her head, one standing, one bent, as if she had not yet decided which way she belonged. Her eyes, dark and enormous, lifted toward Nathan with a calm that broke something open inside him. She did not cry. She did not move away. She lifted her front paw and placed it against his wrist, light as a question mark. Nathan's throat closed. Margaret crouched beside him. Hypothermia, severe dehydration, malnutrition, likely trauma to the right hind leg. We're stabilizing her now. Lucy was already spreading a thermal blanket, her hands shaking, whispering to the puppy as if words alone might keep her alive. Nathan removed his gloves and slipped his hand beneath the blanket, feeling the thin warmth of the small body, the fragile beating of a heart that should not have been this tired so early in life. "Any owner?" he asked. Margaret shook her head. No witnesses, no vehicle description. Snow covered the tracks. The wind howled, as if agreeing. Inside the clinic, the lights hummed. They laid the puppy on the exam table, warming lamps positioned carefully, IV fluids prepared. Nathan remained, filling out the incident report. His pen hesitated over the line marked Animal Description. He wrote, Female, German Shepherd, approx. 5 months, black and tan, injured hind leg, found abandoned in winter conditions. His hand paused, then he added, conscious, responsive, no vocalization. When he looked up, the puppy was watching him, not pleading, observing, as if measuring him. Dr. Samuel Ortiz entered, 36, average height, lean build, dark hair curling at the temples, eyes permanently tired from too many night shifts and not enough sleep. Sam was brilliant but carried the quiet sadness of a man who had lost his younger sister to illness when he was a boy. It made him careful, endlessly careful, with fragile lives. He examined the leg gently. Swelling, possible fracture, no open wound, pulse weak but stable. Will need imaging, but first she needs warmth and fluids. Lucy exhaled in relief at the word stable. Nathan leaned closer. The puppy shifted, pressing her face against his wrist again. Her breath was warm now, damp. He noticed the faint scar across her muzzle, an old injury, healed poorly. How long can you hold her? He asked. Margaret met his eyes. Under state law, abandoned animal. We can hold 72 hours for investigation. After evaluation, we decide treatment or, if prognosis is poor and suffering is severe, humane euthanasia. The word fell between them like ice. 5 years earlier, a winter avalanche outside Breckenridge had taken his wife Emily, a schoolteacher with dark curls and a laugh that made strangers smile. She had been hiking with friends. The mountain had chosen otherwise. Nathan had survived combat, fires, floods, but nothing had prepared him for coming home to a house that no longer knew her footsteps. Since then, he lived alone on the edge of town with an old rescue dog that died last spring, and a silence he never tried to fill. He did his job, he went home, he slept, he repeated. Until now. The puppy's paw tightened slightly around his wrist. He swallowed. Let me open a neglect investigation. Margaret studied him. She trusted Nathan. Everyone in Silverpine did. I'll need the paperwork. He signed the temporary protective custody form, his name bold across the line. Officer Nathan Cole. The snowstorm outside intensified, pressing against the windows, the world narrowing to the small room and the smaller life on the table. As they moved the puppy to the warming kennel, Lucy whispered, She's so quiet, Sam replied. Sometimes the strongest ones don't have the energy to scream. Nathan remained until the fourth line was secure, until the temperature monitor showed the faintest rise. When he finally stepped back, the puppy's eyes followed him. He paused at the door. I'll check back, he said, though no one had asked him to. Outside, the town of Silverpine continued under its blanket of white, unaware that a decision had already shifted the future of 2 lives. The snow did not stop that night. It pressed against the windows of the Silverpine Veterinary Clinic like a slow, relentless tide, the wind moaning through the pine trees as if the mountain itself were mourning something it had not yet lost. Inside, the clinic smelled of antiseptic and wet wool. The heating vents hummed with uneven patience, fighting the cold that crept through every seam in the building. Officer Nathan Cole remained seated on a metal chair outside the warming kennel, his coat folded over the backrest, his hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee that had long gone untouched. He watched the small shape inside the glass enclosure, the German shepherd puppy who had been abandoned in the storm, her chest rising and falling with the faint determination of a creature not yet ready to surrender its claim on the world. Dr. Margaret Hale returned with a clipboard tucked against her ribs. She moved with the same controlled stride she always had, tall and narrow as a fence line against the wind. Her temperature is climbing, she said quietly. Still low, but improving. Hydration is stabilizing. Nathan nodded, eyes never leaving the kennel. Lucy Benton stood beside the counter, wrapping fresh gauze with hands that were no longer shaking as badly. Her freckles stood out starkly against her pale skin, the kind of face that wore worry openly, unable to pretend at calm. She hasn't whimpered once, Lucy said, half to herself. I've never seen that in a puppy this young. Dr. Samuel Ortiz leaned against the doorway, rubbing his jaw, exhaustion pulling at his posture. Some of them don't cry, he said. They just watch, like they're waiting to see who shows up. Nathan finally turned. When can we image the leg? Sam straightened. As soon as her core temp stabilizes. We don't want to shock her system. Nathan checked the time. Nearly 9. Night had fallen fully now, the town swallowed by snow. I'm filing the neglect report, Nathan said. Margaret's gaze held his. You'll need to document probable cause. He nodded. Weather exposure, malnutrition, untreated trauma, abandonment, no collar, no chip. Margaret gave a slight nod. She had filled out too many similar forms over the years. Each one carried the same silent question. How could anyone leave something alive to die this way? Nathan stepped into the small office near the front desk, the heater clicking on and off, the walls lined with faded photos of recovered animals and long-retired staff. He filled in the incident log carefully, his handwriting steady, precise, the discipline of years in uniform. As he wrote, he thought of Emily again. The avalanche had happened in late February, a winter not unlike this one. He had been on duty when the call came. By the time he reached the mountain, the rescue teams were already digging. When they found her, she was peaceful, the snow covering her like a blanket, as if the mountain itself had claimed her gently. Nathan had never forgiven the world for that kindness coming too late. When he returned to the kennel, Lucy was sitting cross-legged on the floor, humming something soft and off-key, a childhood tune her grandmother used to sing. The puppy's ears twitched at the sound. Nathan crouched. The glass was warm under his palm. She responds to voices, Lucy whispered, especially yours. Nathan looked at the small, thin face inside. The puppy's eyes lifted, dark and solemn, and again her paw slid forward, touching the glass where his hand rested. He felt the pressure through the pain like a memory. Has she eaten? He asked. A few drops of electrolyte solution, Sam replied. That's all she can manage. At last, Margaret checked the thermometer and nodded. We can move her. They transferred the puppy gently to the imaging room, Lucy holding the IV line steady, Sam supporting the injured leg. Nathan walked beside them, silent as the snow. In the X-ray suite, the lights were harsh, the floor cold beneath his boots. He stood with his arms folded as the images appeared on the screen, gray and ghostly. Sam leaned forward, studying the monitor. There, he said. Hairline fracture along the femoral shaft, no displacement, no pelvic involvement, no internal bleeding. Margaret exhaled. Lucy's shoulders dropped in relief. So she can heal? Lucy asked. Sam nodded. With rest, splinting, nutrition, and time. She's in pain, but it's treatable. Nathan's jaw tightened. He imagined the person who had left her in the storm, who had decided this small life was disposable. Then she's not a candidate for euthanasia, Nathan said. Margaret met his gaze. Correct. She turned to her clipboard. We proceed with medical care. They returned the puppy to the kennel, wrapping her leg, adjusting the IV. Nathan remained, watching every movement. At some point, Lucy asked, Do you want to give her a name? Nathan hesitated. He had learned not to name things that might leave him. But the word slipped out before he could stop it. Ayla. The name sounded like a whisper of wind across snow. The puppy's ears flicked, and for the first time her tail moved, just once, a tiny signal, like a candle flickering in a dark room. The hours passed. Snow continued to pile against the clinic door. Sam left to grab supplies from his car and returned with his coat dusted white. Margaret checked the vitals again. She's holding, she said. Barely, but she's holding. Nathan stepped closer to the kennel and knelt. You're doing good, Ayla, he murmured. He did not know why he said it, only that it felt necessary. Near midnight, Lucy brewed fresh coffee, the smell briefly warming the sterile air. You should go home, Lucy said to Nathan. He shook his head. Not yet, she smiled faintly. You always stay, she said, not accusing, just observing. Nathan looked at the kennel. Somebody has to. At 1 a.m, Ayla stirred, shifting her weight, a soft whine barely audible. Sam adjusted the IV rate. Pain's breaking through, he said. Margaret prepared a measured dose of analgesic. Nathan watched, helpless, as the puppy's breathing steadied again. Outside, the wind roared, and the town of Silver Pines slept, unaware of the quiet war being fought in a small room on the edge of its map. Sometime after 2, Nathan stepped outside for air. The cold hit him hard, sharp and clean. The sky was a sheet of black glass, the moon blurred behind cloud. He stood in the snow and let it fall on his face, thinking of all the moments he had believed himself done with caring. He returned inside and took the chair beside the kennel, his boots planted on the floor, his hands folded in his lap like a man at a bedside. Just before dawn, Ayla's temperature rose again. Lucy's face tightened with fear. Sam worked the meds, adjusting, monitoring. Margaret's voice was steady. "She's fighting something deeper," she said. Nathan leaned forward, his breath fogging the glass. "Stay," he whispered. Ayla's eyes opened. She did not move, but she looked at him. The world seemed to hold its breath. When the sky outside finally lightened to gray, the storm began to weaken. The wind fell. The clinic was quiet except for the machines and the steady breathing of a small, stubborn heart. Margaret straightened. "She's stabilized," she said. Lucy let out a sob she had been holding for hours. Sam closed his eyes. Nathan did not move. He watched Ayla sleep, her body finally at peace for the moment, and he knew something had already changed. The decision had been made. The storm returned before the sun had fully risen, as if the mountain had decided the night had not finished speaking. Snow pressed against the windows of the Silver Pine Veterinary Clinic with renewed insistence, the sky a dull slate that refused to promise morning. Inside, the lights glowed weak and yellow, the air heavy with the scent of antiseptic, warm plastic, and the quiet fear that settles wherever lives hang in the balance. Officer Nathan Cole had not moved from his chair. He sat beside Ayla's kennel, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, his breath slow and measured, the posture of a man who had learned in other places and other wars that motion was not always the same as action. His eyes never left her. The German Shepherd puppy lay wrapped in layered blankets, her small body connected to tubes and wires, her injured leg splinted, her chest rising and falling with a fragile rhythm that seemed too soft for the size of the room, let alone the world. Dr. Margaret Hale entered first, coat still on, hair pulled into its familiar tight knot, the sharp lines of her face softened by exhaustion. She was followed by Dr. Samuel Ortiz, who had slept less than an hour in the supply room, and Lucy Benton, who carried 2 mugs of coffee that were already growing cold. "She's holding," Margaret said, checking the monitor. "Heart rate steady, temperature down slightly." Nathan nodded. He had learned to read those numbers the way some men read prayer books. Lucy crouched beside the kennel, her red hair falling forward as she gently adjusted the blanket around Ayla's neck. "You're doing so good, baby," she whispered. "You're so brave." Ayla did not respond. Her eyes remained closed, her breathing shallow but even. The flicker of her tail from the night before had vanished. In its place was a stillness that made Nathan's chest tighten. Sam rubbed his face. "Her blood work's concerning. White cell counts elevated. Infections likely systemic. We're pushing antibiotics, fluids, electrolytes, but her body's been starving for too long. It's fighting on empty." Margaret's gaze shifted to Nathan. "She's in a critical window." Nathan swallowed. "What does that mean?" "It means," Margaret said carefully, "that the next 12 hours decide everything." The words settled between them like falling snow. By mid-morning, Ayla's condition worsened. Her breathing became shallow, uneven. A faint tremor ran through her frame, subtle but relentless. Lucy noticed first. "She's shivering," she whispered. Sam checked the monitor, her temps spiking again. They moved quickly. More fluids, adjusted antibiotics, cooling cloths along her neck and paws. Nathan stepped aside, but he did not leave the room. He stood against the wall, fists clenched at his sides, the sound of the machines beating in his ears. Outside, the wind roared. Inside, the world narrowed to one small body and the people refusing to let it go. At noon, Ayla's fever peaked. Her heart rate surged, then dropped, then surged again. Lucy pressed her hand to her mouth, eyes filling. Sam's voice remained calm, but Nathan saw the fear behind it. Margaret issued instructions with the steady authority of someone who had fought death more times than she could count. Nathan crouched beside the kennel. He did not touch her, afraid the weight of his hand might be too much. "Ayla," he said quietly. Her ear twitched. His voice broke. "Stay with me." He did not remember when he had started talking to her like that. Perhaps he always had. The hours crawled. At 2 in the afternoon, the clinic phone rang. Nathan ignored it. Lucy answered, murmured something about limited services today due to weather, hung up, and returned to the room as if the outside world no longer existed. At 3, Sam leaned back against the counter, his shoulders sagging. "We're doing everything we can," he said. "Her body's just—" He did not finish. Nathan closed his eyes. He saw Emily's face the last time he had kissed her goodbye before that winter hike. He saw the snow closing over her in the photographs from the rescue. He felt again the hollow silence that followed. He could not lose another soul to winter. As the afternoon bled toward evening, Ayla's tremors intensified. Her muscles quivered with exhaustion. She would not lift her head. When Lucy offered her a few drops of warm broth, Ayla turned away. Margaret checked her vitals again. "She's crashing." The word struck Nathan harder than any blow. Sam moved, fast and precise. More oxygen, adjusted medication. Lucy held the IV line steady, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. Nathan stepped closer. His knees touched the floor. He placed one hand on the outside of the kennel, right over Ayla's chest. He did not care if it broke protocol. "Ayla," he whispered. His voice shook. "You don't get to leave, not after all this." Her breathing faltered. For a moment, the world went very, very quiet. Nathan's heart slammed against his ribs. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against the glass. "Please," he said. The word came out broken. "Please stay." The machines beeped, sharp and frantic. Sam's hands moved faster. Margaret's voice was firm. "Hold on, girl." Lucy sobbed openly now. Then, slowly, impossibly, the beeping softened. Ayla's chest rose again, a little stronger this time. The tremors eased, not gone, but quieter, as if her body had found something to hold on to. Nathan exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Night fell. The storm outside faded, the snow easing into a soft, endless descent. The town of Silverpine lay buried beneath white, its streets silent, its houses dark. Inside the clinic, time lost its meaning. Nathan remained. At midnight, Lucy convinced Sam to sleep for an hour. Margaret dozed in her chair, clipboard still in hand. Nathan stayed on the floor beside the kennel, his back against the wall, his eyes never closing. Around 2 a.m, Ayla stirred. It was barely a movement, a shift of her paw, a faint twitch of her ear. Nathan froze. Then, with an effort that seemed to cost her everything, Ayla opened her eyes. They were cloudy, unfocused, but they found him. His throat closed. He leaned forward. "Hey," he whispered. "Hey, I'm here." Her tail moved. Once. Weak, but real. Nathan's breath broke into a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He did not know how long he sat there, watching her chest rise and fall, listening to the machines, listening to the quiet. When the first pale light of morning slipped through the windows, the storm had finally passed. Margaret woke, checked the monitors, and let out a long breath. "She's stable," she said softly. "For now." Lucy pressed her hands together. She made it through the night. Sam returned, eyes heavy with sleep but brighter with hope. That was the worst of it. Nathan did not speak. He only watched Ayla sleep, her body finally resting, her small heart still beating against everything that had tried to take it. He knew then that whatever came next, he was no longer just a witness. He was part of her story, and she was part of his. The snow did not stop falling, but it softened. Silverpine woke under a pale winter sun that barely cleared the mountains, its light slipping between clouds like something hesitant, uncertain whether it was welcome. The storm had taken the sharp edge from the night, leaving the world hushed and white, the streets buried, the pine branches bowed with quiet surrender. In the Silverpine Veterinary Clinic, the machines hummed, the heaters ticked, and a small life continued to argue stubbornly with everything that had tried to end it. Ayla slept. Not the restless, trembling half-sleep of the night before, but a deeper, heavier kind that finally belonged to the living. Her chest rose with steadier rhythm. Her limbs lay still beneath the blankets, the splinted leg wrapped carefully, the IV line secured. A faint warmth returned to her ears. Officer Nathan Cole sat where he had been for hours, his back against the wall, boots crossed at the ankles, hands folded loosely in his lap. His face was drawn, unshaven, his eyes rimmed red with exhaustion, but there was something else there now too, a cautious light, the kind that appears only when a man has survived a long, dark stretch and is afraid to believe it has truly ended. Dr. Margaret Hale entered quietly, clipboard tucked against her ribs. She moved with the same measured precision as always, but her shoulders were lower this morning. The tension eased just enough to allow breath. "She's resting," she said, checking the monitors. "Vitals are holding. Fever's down." Lucy Benton appeared from the supply room carrying fresh blankets, her red hair tucked under a wool hat, freckles bright against pale skin. Her eyes were swollen from crying but shone with relief. "She made it," Lucy whispered, as if the walls might shatter if the words were spoken too loudly. Dr. Samuel Ortiz followed, sleeves rolled, hair disheveled from a night on the clinic couch. He gave Nathan a tired smile. "Worst of the storm's behind her," he said. "Now comes the long work." Nathan nodded. Long work, he understood. For 2 days, Ayla slept. They fed her through a syringe at first, slow drops of nutrient broth that she swallowed without opening her eyes. On the 3rd morning, her tail moved again when Lucy whispered her name. By the 4th, her ears lifted when Sam's footsteps approached. Nathan spoke to her constantly, low and steady, telling her about the town, the mountains, the old cabin he lived in on the edge of the forest where the snowdrifts swallowed the porch every winter, the empty rooms that waited there. On the 5th morning, something changed. Nathan noticed it before the machines did. Ayla's eyes opened and stayed open. They were still cloudy with weakness, but they followed him when he moved across the room. He froze, afraid even the sound of his breath might frighten the moment away. "Hey," he whispered. Her ears twitched. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her head an inch from the blanket. The effort made her shiver, but she did not stop. Lucy covered her mouth. Sam's hands tightened on the chart. Margaret's gaze sharpened. "She's trying," Lucy whispered. Nathan crouched beside the kennel. "Easy," he murmured. "You don't have to do anything today." Ayla held his eyes, then lowered her head again, exhausted but awake. The hours passed in a hush of hope. By afternoon, she accepted a few bites of soft food from Lucy's hand. Her tail gave the faintest thump. Nathan felt something tighten painfully in his chest. On the 7th day after the storm, Sam knelt beside the kennel and loosened the door. "Let's see what she can do," he said. They cleared the small treatment room, laying padded mats across the floor. Lucy placed her hands under Ayla's chest while Sam supported her injured hind leg. Nathan stood directly in front of her, his boots planted, his hands open, his heart pounding louder than the wind outside. "Whenever you're ready, girl," he said. Ayla shifted. At first it was nothing more than a tremor through her shoulders. Then her front paws pressed against the mat. Her body rose halfway, shaking violently, then dropped back down. She panted, eyes wide, breath shallow. Lucy stroked her neck. "That's okay. That's perfect. You did it." Ayla rested, gathering something invisible. Then she tried again. This time she pushed harder. Her front legs straightened. Her back leg dragged, refusing to obey, but she compensated, adjusting, wobbling. For one suspended second, she stood. The room held its breath. Then her hindquarters collapsed and she fell sideways into Lucy's arms. Lucy laughed through her tears. She stood. She stood. Nathan did not realize he was crying until the warmth slid down his face. They tried again the next morning, and again the next. Each time she lasted a second longer. By the 10th day, Ayla stood on her own long enough to take a step, just one. Her back leg dragged behind her, the splint heavy, the effort monumental, but the step was real, hers, unborrowed from anyone else. The clinic went silent. Sam whispered, "Unbelievable." Margaret closed her eyes. Nathan dropped to one knee, his hands shaking. "That's it," he whispered. "That's it." The next step came an hour later, then another. By the end of the week, she could cross the room, not gracefully, not steadily, but with determination that seemed far larger than her small, battered body. The first time she reached Nathan, she pressed her head into his chest and collapsed, exhausted, trusting, alive. Nathan held her carefully, his arms wrapped around the warmth he had nearly lost before he ever had the chance to keep. The town of Silver Pine began to hear about her. A dog that should have died, a puppy pulled from the storm. People stopped by the clinic with treats, toys, knitted blankets. Old men who had buried their own dogs years before stood quietly outside her kennel and wiped their eyes when she lifted her head to greet them. Children pressed their hands to the glass and whispered her name. Ayla accepted it all with gentle patience. She never barked, she never whined. She simply watched the world, as if learning how to belong in it again. One morning, 2 weeks after her first step, Nathan arrived at the clinic just as the sun broke through the clouds. Snow glittered on the windows like scattered stars. He knelt beside Ayla's mat. "Ready to try the hallway today?" he asked. Ayla lifted her head. Her tail moved. Lucy opened the door. Slowly, carefully, Ayla rose. She stood. She stepped. 1 foot, then another, then another. Her back legs still dragged slightly, but she did not stop. She crossed the threshold into the hallway, the longest walk she had ever taken. The staff lined the walls, silent witnesses to something that felt sacred. When she reached the end, she turned, looked at Nathan, and let out the softest sound. Not quite a bark, not quite a whine, just breath given voice. Nathan's heart shattered and reassembled itself in the same moment. "She's coming back," Lucy whispered. Nathan shook his head, smiling through tears. "No," he said. "She already did." Outside, the snow continued to fall over Silverpine, but something in the town had shifted. The mountains stood unchanged, the winter as cold as ever, but in a small clinic on a quiet street, a life had taken its first steps back into the world. And Nathan knew, without yet understanding what it meant, that those steps were walking directly into his own future. Spring did not arrive in Silverpine the way it did in other places. There were no sudden blossoms, no warm breezes racing through open windows. Instead, winter loosened its grip slowly, like an old guardian reluctant to leave. Snow still lined the streets in gray banks, but the sky had begun to open, and the sun lingered longer each afternoon. Inside the Silverpine Veterinary Clinic, a different season had already taken hold. Ayla could walk the length of the hallway now, her back leg no longer dragged. The splint had been removed a week earlier, replaced by cautious strength and a careful, measured stride. She still moved as if every step mattered, as if the memory of pain had taught her to respect the ground beneath her paws. Her coat had thickened, the dull patches replaced with warm black and copper shine. When she sat, her ears stood tall and even, the final sign that her body had accepted its place in the world. Nathan Cole watched her from the doorway of the treatment room as she followed Lucy down the hall, tail swaying in a slow, thoughtful arc. He had not missed a single appointment, a single checkup, a single therapy session. The clinic staff joked that Ayla had acquired her own personal bodyguard, but Nathan did not deny it. Since the night she had almost slipped away, he had not allowed the world to take her from his sight again. That morning, Dr. Margaret Hale called a meeting. They gathered in the small consultation office, its walls lined with photographs of animals long gone but never forgotten. Margaret stood at the head of the table, clipboard in hand, glasses perched low on her nose. Sam leaned against the counter, arms folded. Lucy sat on the edge of a chair, bouncing her knee with nervous energy. Nathan remained by the door, as always. "We've completed the 72-hour hold," Margaret said. "Extended care period, legal clearance. No owner has come forward. No missing animal reports match her description. Under state law, she's now officially eligible for adoption." The word hung in the air. Lucy smiled. "That's amazing." Sam nodded. "She's ready." Nathan's chest tightened. Margaret's gaze shifted to him. "I wanted you to hear it first." Nathan swallowed. "I figured it was coming." They had prepared him for this. He had told himself this was the outcome. Ayla would find a family, a warm home, children, a yard, someone who would love her the way she deserved. It was the ending he had wanted for her from the beginning, so why did his hands feel like ice? That afternoon, the first adoption inquiry arrived. A couple in their early 30s, Mark and Elise Turner. Mark was tall, athletic, with kind eyes and a soft beard that made him look perpetually thoughtful. Elise was slender, blonde, her smile quick and bright, the kind of woman who spoke easily with strangers. They lived outside of town on a fenced property, worked remotely, no other pets, 2 children in elementary school. They had lost their last dog to cancer the year before. They stood in the reception area, holding the application between them like something fragile. "We saw her photo online," Elise said. "The shepherd puppy. Ayla." We couldn't stop thinking about her. Nathan brought them outside to the small fenced courtyard behind the clinic. Ayla lay beneath the pine tree, the spring sun warming her fur. When she heard Nathan's footsteps, she lifted her head and wagged her tail. "Hey, girl," Nathan murmured. Ayla rose carefully and walked toward the Turners. Mark crouched and offered his hand. Ayla sniffed it, then nudged his fingers with her nose. Elise knelt beside them and stroked Ayla's ears, laughing softly. "She's beautiful." Nathan stood back, forcing himself to breathe. They spent nearly half an hour together. Ayla followed them around the courtyard, accepted treats, allowed Elise to hug her, even gave one tentative lick to Mark's cheek that made him laugh out loud. "This is the one," Elise whispered to Mark. Mark nodded. "We'd love to give her a home." Nathan felt the words land somewhere deep inside him, not painful exactly, but heavy. When it was time, Nathan called Ayla back. She followed him, not eagerly, not reluctantly, simply. He stopped near the bench and knelt. "Ayla," he said quietly. The Turners stood a few feet away, smiling, hopeful. Ayla looked at Nathan. Then she turned and walked back to the Turners, her tail giving a small wag. Nathan's chest loosened, but then, without warning, she stopped. She turned around, walked back, and sat down directly at Nathan's feet. She did not move, not an inch. Elise laughed softly. "I think she's confused." Mark shook his head slowly, studying the way Ayla's body leaned toward Nathan, the way her eyes never left his face. "No," he said. "I don't think she is." Nathan stared at her. "Ayla." She lifted her chin, her eyes steady, as if she were reminding him of something he had known since the night the storm brought her to him. She had chosen. The Turners exchanged a look. Elise's smile softened, not disappointed, but understanding. "It's okay," she said gently. "Some bonds form for a reason." Mark extended his hand to Nathan. "She's yours." Nathan did not trust his voice. The Turners left their application on the counter and walked out into the spring light. Nathan knelt on the pavement. Ayla leaned into him, her body warm, alive, present. He wrapped his arms around her and for the first time in years allowed himself to belong to something again. That evening he returned to the clinic with the adoption paperwork. Margaret reviewed it silently. When she reached the last line, she looked up at him. "Are you sure?" Nathan nodded. She slid the pen toward him. He signed. Owner, Nathan Cole. The ink trembled slightly, but the name was clear. When he finished, Margaret closed the folder. "Congratulations," she said. Nathan glanced down. Ayla sat beside his chair, her head resting against his knee. Chosen. By the time the first real spring arrived in Silver Pine, the mountains were still wearing their white crowns, but the valley had begun to breathe again. The snow retreated in slow, reluctant lines along the streets. The river cracked open, its dark water moving for the first time in months. The town no longer felt like a place holding its breath. Neither did Nathan. The cabin on the edge of the forest had been silent for years, not empty, just quiet in the way of a house that no longer believed anyone was coming home. When Nathan unlocked the door that first night with Ayla at his side, the wood stove cold and the windows fogged with frost, something in the walls seemed to listen. Ayla stepped inside carefully. She sniffed the air, then the floor, then the old rug that still smelled faintly of Nathan's long-gone shepherd ranger. Her ears flicked, her tail lifted. She crossed the room slowly, deliberately, as if inspecting the life she had chosen. Nathan dropped his keys on the counter and stood there, unsure what to do with the space around him. "Well," he said softly, "this is it." Ayla looked up at him. Then she walked over, pressed her body against his leg, and sat. The cabin exhaled. The weeks that followed unfolded quietly. Every morning, Nathan and Ayla walked the narrow trail down to the road, the frost crunching beneath their boots and paws. He went back to work at the Silver Pine Police Department. She waited at home at first, then later at the small office the department had cleared for her beside his desk. The chief, Harold Bennett, was a heavy-set man in his early 60s with silver hair and a voice like weathered oak. He had known Nathan since the day he transferred to Silver Pine after Emily's death. One afternoon, he watched Ayla lie at Nathan's feet, calm as still water. "She's got a presence," Harold said. "Ever thought about certification work?" Nathan shook his head. "She's still recovering." Harold studied Ayla. Some dogs don't need a lot of training to know their job. 3 months later, Ayla completed her therapy evaluation. The trainer, Rebecca Linwood, a small, sharp-eyed woman with decades of experience and a scar along her forearm from an early canine rescue, observed quietly as children from the elementary school library program sat on the floor reading aloud. Ayla lay among them, her head resting on a boy's knee, her breathing slow, steady, anchoring. Rebecca smiled. "She's a natural," she told Nathan. "Not every dog has this." Nathan watched Ayla lift her head to nudge the hand of a shy girl who had stopped reading. The girl smiled and kept going. He felt something inside his chest loosen for the first time in years. By summer, Ayla became part of the town. She accompanied Nathan on welfare checks, sat with families who had lost loved ones, lay beside victims in hospital rooms, and waited patiently in the station lobby when the world outside felt too loud for someone to face alone. People started calling her the quiet healer of Silverpine. Nathan never did. To him, she was just Ayla. At night, she slept on the rug beside his bed. When the storms returned, she climbed onto the mattress and pressed her back against his chest until the thunder passed. When he woke from dreams of avalanches and sirens and cold white silence, her face was there, solid and warm and real. One winter evening, nearly a year after the storm that brought her to him, Nathan stood with Ayla on the same street where he had first received the call. Snow fell gently now, not with fury, but with grace. The town lights reflected in Ayla's dark eyes. He knelt, pressing his forehead to hers. "You were supposed to die," he whispered. Ayla tilted her head, then licked his nose. Nathan laughed, a real laugh, the kind that startled him with its sound. "I guess the snow had other plans." They walked home together, their shadows long and steady on the white road. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low. Nathan hung his coat, poured 2 bowls of water, and sat beside Ayla on the floor. She leaned into him, her heart beat strong beneath his hand. Nathan closed his eyes. For the first time since Emily died, the future did not feel like a place he was afraid to enter. Outside, Silverpine slept. The mountains kept their watch, and somewhere between the falling snow and the quiet breathing of a once-broken dog, a man finally found his way back to the world. Sometimes God does not send thunder or angels. Sometimes he sends a broken soul into your life and asks what you will do with it. This little German shepherd was never an accident. She was a miracle wrapped in fur and weakness. She was God's quiet answer to a man who thought his heart was finished. And in everyday life, it is the same for all of us. We meet people in moments that look small and ordinary, but inside them are the very miracles that can change us if we choose to care. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment to let us know where you are watching from, and subscribe to our channel so we can continue bringing you stories that heal the heart. May God bless every person watching this video. May He place peace in your home and light on your path. And if you believe in the power of His miracles, type Amen in the comments below.